This video is brought to you with the support of TrueFire. Learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Hi, this is Keith Williams. Welcome to 5-Watt World, where we're interested to help you get the most music from the least gear. Just this year, after playing guitar for 50 years, I bought my first SG. And an SG just happened to be the first really good electric guitar I ever got to see in person. It was probably around 1975, and I was 15 years old. I'd been playing my acoustic, a 12-string Epiphone, with the folk group at church. And the leader of that group heard me going on about Les Pauls, and she said, "Oh, I have a Les Paul. I'll bring it in next week for you to see it." I got there early, and I waited for her to load in. I stood anxiously while she laid it down and opened the case. What I saw was not the gold top I was expecting, but rather a 1962 Les Paul SG Standard. To my youthful eyes, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. Gleaming, tasteful, and aggressive all at once. Glistening nickel, deep red cherry finish, and pearl white inlays laid back in the deep gold plush of the case. I can still remember the smell of the lemon oil as the case opened, and I'll never forget the sight of that 62 Les Paul Standard in the morning light coming through those stained glass windows. It's safe to say that when I started playing guitar, the 60s and 70s were the time for the SG. Carlos Santana, Duane Allman, Eric Clapton, Tony Iommi, Pete Townsend, and Angus Young. But it might also be argued that its time has certainly come again recently. So if you've always wanted to know more about the full history of the creation of Gibson's solid guitar, then stay tuned because this is the 5-Watt World short history of the Gibson SG. If you like the style of video, be sure to subscribe. Or to support what we do, grab a t-shirt, hoodie, Stomp preset pack, or a 5-Watt World Barber Bus overdrive pedal. And become an even bigger part of 5-Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5-Watt on Patreon. There's a friend level to suit any budget. All the links are in the description. In 1960, Gibson president Ted McCarty called an emergency sales meeting at the factory in Kalamazoo. The sales numbers of the various Les Paul guitars had fallen after peaking in 1959, and the feeling at Gibson was that there needed to be some major changes in the solid body guitar line. Today, we look back and think they were turning away from the best guitars they'd ever built, but guitarists were years away from demanding more Les Pauls, and they just weren't selling enough guitars in the wake of having made a huge expansion at the factory. So Gibson put a team together under the direction of Larry Allers to come up with a new solid body guitar design. According to the prevailing winds at Gibson at the time, they chose new finishes, new slimmer necks, and a new double cutaway body with greater access to the upper frets. At the time, Gibson would build new designs by having one of the top engineers build the complete prototype for upper management to then evaluate. According to Gil Hembry, author of Gibson Guitars, Ted McCarty's Golden Era, quote, "It's possible that Allers actually did the SG pattern because he would sometimes take on the most difficult assignments himself." The prototype would then have been played for top management and sales staff by some of Gibson's guitar playing employees. From this team came what we now know as the SG. In Tony Bacon's excellent The SG Guitar Book, he describes the body as, quote, "a modernistic amalgam of bevels and points and angles, and the design invited players to reach the topmost frets with ease and speed." I couldn't have said that better myself. Despite a move away from the Les Paul name on the lesser special and TV models in 58 and 59, the announcement in early 61 for the first two SG guitars were still listed as the Les Paul Standard and the Les Paul Custom. I wonder how many newspaper classified ads led to confusion when they called about a Les Paul only to have the seller describe the signature horns of the SG. Production of the guitars actually began at the end of 1960. Gibson wrote in the announcement, "The Les Paul is now offered with a completely new styling, thinner, lighter in weight, and custom contoured. Wonderfully designed solid body, perfectly balanced for playing in a standing position." We might scoff at that last bit today, as SGs are famous for having neck dive. The SG styling carried through the rest of the solid body line. The Junior, SG TV, and the SG Special were announced in the summer of 61, coinciding with the summer NAMM show. The prices in that first year issue were the Junior, Junior 3/4, and TV at $142.50, the Special at $195, the Standard at $265, and the Custom at $395. The new SG had a body and neck made from mahogany sourced from then British Honduras, now Belize, in Central America. They worked a single slab of mahogany into a slim shape with large cutaways and sharp points. There were beveled edges on both the body and the cutaways of around 22 degrees, along the edges on the front and the back. The bevels make the body appear even thinner and are an essential part of the SG's design aesthetic. The thinner neck, also mahogany, was glued into the body with a mortise and tenon joint. The thinness of the body in conjunction with the position of the neck pickup routing meant that the tenon was short and only minimal glue held it in place. This led to cracks and breaks in the neck joints, and as the 60s went on, Gibson struggled to address this, trying multiple design tweaks that can be seen on the backs of some of the guitars. Some joints are smooth between the body and neck where others have a distinct step. The 61 standards were finished in the cherry red color that had first made its appearance in '59 for the double-cut juniors and specials. The red was created by applying red dye pore filler to the mahogany body, followed by 1 or 2 coats of clear lacquer, resulting in the familiar wood grain being visible through the finish. The black multiply pickguard was fixed to the body with 5 screws, and a small plastic strip between the end of the fingerboard and the neck pickup is there to cover the route. 2 PAF pickups with nickel-plated covers were set into the body. A vibrato tailpiece with Gibson named the Vibrola, though we now think of it as a sideways vibrato. There were 4 metal cap, top hat knobs. The 3-way selector was in the front of the control panel. The output jack moved to the face of the guitar just behind the controls. This became another problem point as there was very little wood there to support the jack, and cracks would often develop. On the standard model, perloid plastic position markers would inlaid in the Brazilian rosewood fingerboard, and the nut was made of hard plastic as well. Kluson Deluxe tuners were fitted to the headstock with closed metal backs and plastic tulip-shaped buttons, with a 2-ring base on a thin metal shaft. The serial number was stamped on the back of the headstock in ink and oversprayed with lacquer. The black plastic truss rod cover was inscribed with Les Paul, and the familiar Gibson logo on the top of the headstock was above a thistle inlay. In keeping with the Les Paul customs of the past, the new custom came with gold hardware, block perloid inlays, and a new gleaming white finish. Like some single cuts of the past, it also came with 3 humbucking pickups. With similar control layout to the standard, the selector switch dealt with the 3 pickups by having the neck alone, middle and bridge alone as the 3 choices. From the time of the launch, it was possible to order custom colors direct from Gibson, though it was exceedingly rare. Customs were made in cherry, black, and even sunburst. Juniors, TV, and special models came with 1 or 2 P90 pickups respectively. They had unbound rosewood fingerboards with dots, Kluson plastic button tuners, and at first a Les Paul on the headstock. All 3 came standard with a wraparound tailpiece, but an optional version was offered with either a 6-saddle bridge or the vibrato tailpiece. Gibson also offered a trio of SG-shaped double-neck guitars. The first Gibson double necks were offered in 1958, but these have been semi-hollow body guitars. The new SG double necks were fully solid. The bodies of the double neck instruments were 16 inches wide, around 3 inches wider than a single neck SG, and at about 12 pounds, they weighed almost twice as much as the regular guitars weighed. The double necks were custom order only, and very few of any one type were built. But Jimmy Page, Alex Lifeson, and Don Felder made history with theirs. The new SG Les Pauls were not immediately embraced in the market by famous players, one exception being blues and R&B guitarist Sister Rosetta Tharpe. An incredible mix of blues, gospel, and pre-rock guitar playing, she played a new white custom to great effect. When she toured in the UK in 1964, her influences spread throughout the islands. She appeared in a blues review that included Muddy Waters, Sonny Terry, and Brownie McGhee, which showed on a British television show that coincided with an already growing interest in American blues amongst young British guitarists. By the end of 1963, Gibson had dropped the Les Paul name from all the SG-shaped guitars. This was due both to the waning popularity of Les as an artist and the fact that his contract with Gibson had run out. In addition to some personal problems, later Les said that he didn't really care for the new design despite being pictured with the guitar in Gibson print ads. The contract quietly ran out in 1962, and for a while, Gibson no longer made Les Paul guitars. The sideways vibrato was replaced with a short vibrola in 1963. By 1964, Gibson showed 4 models in the SG line, a white SG TV and a cherry SG Junior, each for $165, a cherry or white special for $240, the cherry standard at $330, and the white custom for $480. Gibson had made a number of changes to the construction of the SG in the first 5 years. By 1966, the neck joint was by far the strongest it had been, with a greater amount of overlap of the body at the back. Also in 1966, Gibson switched to a much larger pickguard that surrounded both pickups and covered the body both above and below the pickups. Sometimes referred to as a bat wing for its shape, this new idea of a single unit for mounting pickups and pickguards seemed to come straight out of the Fender Stratocaster playbook, and was no doubt less expensive to build into the bargain. To further simplify construction, the factory now generally made a larger route, like it used on the custom to accommodate the 3 pickups and a wiring on all of the SG guitars. Late in the 60s, a few other small changes were made. The nickel plating was changed to chrome. There was a small decrease in the nut width. There was also a slight decrease in the angle of the headstock as it leans back from the neck face. Both guitarists in Big Brother and the Holding Company played SGs backing vocalist Janis Joplin. Sam Andrews played a standard with a lyre vibrola, while James Gurley played a special. To round things out, Peter Albin played an EB3, which effectively was an SG-style bass. George Harrison was a noted user of Gretsch guitars, so folks were surprised when he was seen playing an SG at a concert in London in May of '66. Harrison had likely acquired the SG in the early months of that year and had used it on the Revolver album. Gibson records show that Harrison's standard had been shipped from the factory in October of 1964. He was pictured with the SG in the film clips for Rain and Paperback Writer in '66, Lady Madonna in '68. Around 1969, he gave the SG to Pete Ham of Badfinger, who were signed to the Beatles' Apple Records label. Ham played the guitar throughout the '70s until his death in '75. Ham's brother sold the ex-Harrison SG at auction in 2004 for $567,500. Eric Clapton's second Sunburst Les Paul was stolen in the early months of 1967. Around this time, Clapton had acquired a used SG Standard. The first hint of Clapton using the SG is the sound of a vibrato on the demo recordings that Cream made in London on March 15, 1967. It was also photographed in 1967 at a gig shortly thereafter. Soon after that gig, Cream's manager arranged to have all the band's instruments painted by 2 Dutch painters that were known collectively as The Fool. In the long run, the psychedelic XG would take on the name The Fool for that reason. The artists also painted Jack Bruce's Fender 6 and Ginger Baker's bass drum head. Jack Bruce didn't like the feel of the paint on his Fender and replaced it with, wait for it, an SG-shaped Gibson EB3. Clapton loved the paint job and wrote in his autobiography that they'd turned the SG into a psychedelic fantasy. The guitar was probably built somewhere between '63 and '65, as we know that it had a deluxe vibrola on it when he bought it. Clapton had bits of the vibrola removed, first the arm and then the cover to let the artwork show through, eventually leaving just the frame as a simple tailpiece. He replaced the Kluson tuners with Grovers, as he'd done on his Les Pauls. Clapton managed to hold on to the SG for some time, and he used the guitar extensively on the road and in the studio throughout 1967 and into the summer of '68, most notably on Disraeli gears. After making the move to Stratocasters, he may have given the SG to George Harrison. What we do know is that it ended up with Jack Lomax, an American friend of Harrison's. But by the early '70s, Todd Rundgren had bought the guitar from Lomax. Buck Dharma of Blue Oyster Cult had a custom and a Bigsby-equipped standard, and Jimi Hendrix played a right-handed white 3-pickup custom for about a year starting in late '68, most notably on the tune Red House, marking the start of the rise in the popularity of the model. Mick Taylor, in his final year with the Blues Breakers and at the beginning of his time with the Rolling Stones, often used an SG Standard as well. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. I'm currently having fun going through Eric Johnson's Tone, Melody, and Truth. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5watt35, or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up using the link in the description to support 5 Watt World and get some great lessons at the same time. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. In August of 1969, Woodstock was a bit of an SG showcase. Carlos Santana played an SG Special. He'd go on to use that guitar along with a Les Paul until 1972. Jerry Garcia also used an SG at Woodstock, and he'd go on to use SGs on the Dead's Live Dead album. Johnny Winter played one during his set, and Steve Katz from Blood, Sweat, and Tears used one as well. Though Katz primarily used a 335, he mused later, quote, "I guess I played a red SG standard at Woodstock. If I wasn't so stoned that night, I probably would have remembered." Pete Townsend wielded his famous SG Specials with The Who at Woodstock as well. Pete was pretty rough on his guitars, so we went through a number of specials from 68 to 71, most famously playing one on Live at Leeds. Townsend said he loved that it was such a light and somewhat fragile guitar. He liked that he could bend the neck for vibrato. He said, "You don't need any strength to make the whole guitar bend." When Gibson stopped building the Special with his favorite spec, he said, "I raided every music store in the country practically looking for old SGs." He added that he only got interested in older guitars because Gibson had stopped making them the way they used to. Pete's statement was echoing Clapton's feeling about old Les Pauls. They were at the forefront of the growing vintage guitar movement. By the late 60s, Gibson's sales had peaked along with the rest of the market and had been hot on the heels of a decade of guitar-driven music after the Beatles had appeared on Ed Sullivan in 1964. It was in 1966 that Ted McCarty left Gibson. McCarty was replaced by an accountant who was quickly replaced by another money guy. By 1969, with sales down some $2 million from the previous year, Gibson became part of the newly formed Norland Industries. During 1969, the SG Standard, Custom, and Special were all offered in a new walnut color, as well as their traditional colors. After a decline in sales, SG sales rebounded in 69-70, selling 6,677 standards in 1970. In 1971, Gibson began making some of its pickups with the Gibson logo on them. They also stopped using the Standard and Special name, though a Custom remained in the line. They renamed them the Deluxe and the Pro, respectively. There was a new semicircular plate that held the controls and the jack, which eliminated the need to route the body from the back. The big pickguard was replaced by a Les Paul-style guard. The Deluxe had small block inlays, like a late 60s 335. The bevels were removed from the cutaway and the headstock was made slightly larger. The Pro kept the dots of the Special model, and the Custom kept the full-size block inlays. They moved to a 3-piece mahogany neck with what they called a 90-degree neck pitch. This meant that the neck was parallel to the body, and it did not lean back from the plane of the body as it had before. The neck was shifted further into the body, and this eliminated the gap between the end of the fingerboard and the neck pickup. Accordingly, the bridge was shifted back on the body, which gave it an unbalanced feel. The pickup configurations remained the same. The bridge on the Pro model was switched to a more rectangular shape, often referred to as the harmonica bridge. All three models had a Gibson-branded Bigsby B5 vibrato tailpiece as an option. All of this change lasted just 1 year. Gibson sold what stock of the new models they had during 72 and 73, then brought back the Standard and Special. The bevels returned to the cutaways. The metal control plate and neck changes were dropped. The Special moved to small block inlays along with the Standard. The Special was given 2 mini humbuckers, and the Standard had new hotter super humbucking pickups designed by Bill Lawrence. These are sometimes referred to as tarbacks because the black epoxy used for potting the pickups is visible on the underside. The Custom followed with 3 of the new pickups as well. If you're confused, imagine the guitar players at the time that put up with this dizzying parade of yearly changes. In 77, the Special was dropped, leaving the SG Standard and Custom alone in the line. In the studio to record Black Sabbath's first record in 69, Tony Iommi had a pickup fail in his Strat, so he turned to his backup guitar. He said, "I had an SG as a backup, a second guitar, but I never really played it." They only had 2 days to make the record, so he had no choice but to use the SG. Tony remembers, "And that was it really. I never sort of went back." Iommi used his SG Special for a while and then briefly used a white Custom as well. Around 1970, Birmingham pickup specialist John Birch modified the Special, adding an adjustable bridge and custom pickups. The guitar became known as Monkey for the sticker Iommi had put above the controls. Next, Iommi commissioned Birch and his new employee John Diggins to build him a 24-fret SG-style guitar. The resulting all-maple guitar, painted black, had a stainless steel pickguard, hot birch custom pickups, and cross inlays on the neck. Iommi's move to the custom guitar reflected players' dissatisfaction with what was coming out of Gibson at the time. In '75, Diggins made Iommi another guitar that became his favorite. Nicknamed Old Boy, he played it from then until very recently. This guitar also had a 24-fret neck and the cross inlays. A modified heel joint made the guitar stronger, and the body was based on the contours of Tony's original 60s Special. Frank Zappa had played other Gibsons before switching over to the SG around 1970, when his gold-top Les Paul was stolen. This was probably a brand new guitar, as it had the large pickguard. Zappa played a number of SGs, but his penchant for modding guitars makes it hard to know how many went through his hands. Around May of 1973, Zappa replaced the pickups with 2 uncovered humbuckers and added switches to the pickguard for coil splitting and phasing. That summer, he added a long vibrola and removed the black paint from the headstock face, showing the light laurel wood. It became known as the Roxy guitar, as it's on the sleeve of the record album Roxy and Elsewhere from 1974. After using a 12-string Fender Electric to double the acoustic intro on Stairway to Heaven, Jimmy Page turned to a double-neck EDS 1275 6 and 12-string Gibson to play the tune live. The guitar became iconic of the performance of Stairway, of course, and many seeing Page use one tried one as well. John McLaughlin used a few different 6/12 double-neck guitars with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. Alex Lifeson of Rush started with a mid-70s Cherry 1275, and when it was damaged, replaced it with his famous white one. And of course, Don Felder would play his white double neck with the Eagles on Hotel California. All of this led Gibson to reissuing the 1275 in 1975, with the laminate maple necks available in sunburst, walnut, and white, and as before, on custom order only. More 70s SG players included Dickie Betts, playing a standard in the Allmans Brothers. In '71, Dickie moved to a gold-top Les Paul and sold the SG to his bandmate, Duane Allman. The popular image of Angus Young crashing about the stage in a rock frenzy in his schoolboy shorts and tie would now seem out of place without that SG. Perhaps the most notable player of the model, he got his first SG when he was still a teenager. That first SG was a standard model made in '70 or '71. Big pickguard, long vibrola, and a neck headstock volute. The pickup covers were removed, as they were often, to improve treble response. He swapped out the tuners, took off the vibrato, and put on a wraparound bridge. After 6 years on the road, SG-1, drenched in years of acid sweat, was retired, and SG-2 was purchased in '78. Another early '70s model with the big pickguard, Young would play that guitar on the 1979 album, Highway to Hell. SG-3 was acquired as a backup for the SG-2 during the tour to support the album. SG-3 was a black custom from around 1970, which had the middle pickup removed and a new pickguard cut accordingly. The AC/DC road crew, probably having heard of his work with Iommi, began to have John Diggins keep Angus's guitars in shape. It was Diggins who replaced the neck on SG-1, adding the lightning bolt inlays. With the repairs in place, SG-1 again became Angus's favorite guitar. Angus has used the lightning bolt guitar for every tour since, back in black. Through the '80s, Young was seen playing many other SGs. According to Angus, at last count, he owned over 500 guitars. But it's that first battered and rebuilt SG that has had the greatest impact on his tone. By 1975, Gibson was transitioning to the new factory they'd built outside of Nashville. The new factory was designed to produce a large number of a small variety of models, so moving the production of Les Pauls and SG there from Kalamazoo seemed obvious. By then, there were just 2 SG models, the standard at $479 and the custom at $685. In the late 70s, Gibson produced a number of very short-lived SG models. One of these, the SG, had a walnut body and neck, an ebony fingerboard, and a pale headstock color. It was produced through 1981. They also tried an active SG Artist that had a switch for active electronics and a separate bass and treble controls. Tim Shaw joined Gibson in '78, and by '79 he was working with Bruce Boland in R&D. Together they led a group building guitars for artists, and they were pushing for a return to the style of guitars that had made the company famous in the 50s and 60s. This effort would eventually lead to the Heritage Les Paul reissues of the early 80s. But the first SG reissues didn't come along until 1986, with the release of the SG 62. Gibson had not saved many of the original design materials for the SG, so like the Les Pauls, they were reversed engineered from vintage guitars. They copied almost everything except for the sideways vibrato, so the reissue had a tune-o-matic bridge. The next year saw a reissue custom based on what they'd learned from building the SG 62. From that point on, SGs have been built in the Nashville factory line under a variety of names. The custom was dropped from the price list in 2011 and has only been available in custom shop runs since. Notably, Radiohead's Thom Yorke is mostly seen with a 64 SG Standard, with the vibrola arm removed. Through the 90s, it seemed that besides the custom shop reissues, Gibson didn't quite know what to do with the SG. They added a flametop and called the guitar the SG Supreme in 1999, and this guitar lasted in the line until 2008. Mike Clement became Tony Iommi's guitar tech in 1990, and this led to Clement meeting and hitting it off with Gibson's J.T. Rybolovs. Rybolovs made a few one-off guitars for Iommi, and this led to a Gibson signature Tony Iommi pickups in 1997. And in 1999, the custom shop did a run of Tony Iommi's signature SGs offered in left and right-hand versions. Coming full circle, these were actually copies of Iommi's custom John Diggins guitar with the crosses. The run lasted until 2005. They'd done a factory run of the guitars in 2002 as well. Gibson clearly believes that the SG is a critical part of its history, announcing at Winter NAMM 2020 a new exciting replica of Tony Iommi's Monkey guitar. Gibson launched an Angus Young signature model in 2000, a large pickguard with a long vibrola, and it lasted until 2009 when it was replaced by custom shop versions. The inevitable Pete Townshend SG custom shop reissue came with an interesting twist. A recreation of the guitar he played Live at Leeds, it was a large pickguard special, and it was the first time the custom shop did a replica case with the guitar, shipping it in an Anvil flight case. A factory version was built the next year, and a 50th anniversary run was done in 2011. There was a custom shop run replicas of Jimmy Page's Double Neck in 2007. 25 of these were aged replicas that listed for $33,500. The vintage old stock versions sold for $11,000, and despite these prices, they both sold out quickly. 2011 saw a Dickie Betts SG based on the guitar that he'd long ago sold to Duane Allman. The custom shop called it the From One Brother to Another guitar. 2013 saw the Frank Zappa Roxy SG reissued. There have been further custom shop runs for Brian Ray, Don Felder, and Elliot Easton, and factory signature guitars for Jeff Tweedy and Derek Trucks. It was around 1990 that Derek Trucks' parents found the money to buy their budding guitarist's son a 62 reissue SG Standard. As a slide player, the access to the upper portion of the neck is a unique SG feature that really works for Trucks. He played that original reissue until it had a headstock break around 2000, whereupon he bought another reissue and proceeded to play that guitar for the following 10 years. Around 2011, he began using a Dickie Betts reissue SG. Duane Allman's daughter offered Derek the number 4 artist proof of the run, which he continues to play to this day. The inevitable Trucks signature SG is based on that brother-to-brother guitar, with the tweaks that Derek had made over the years to include removing all the guts of the vibrola and tucking a stop tail down there by the cover. And with that bit on the clear modern master of the SG, I'll wrap up our story. It's tempting to think of the SG as the less talented younger sibling of the Les Paul, but I'd argue that's a mistake. Modern masters continue to return to the SG. Nashville studio cats Tom Bukovac and Kenny Greenberg, for example. Guitar heroes Eric Johnson and Robin Ford have both recorded and toured recently with vintage SGs as well. If you add to that the unique contribution that artists like Clapton, Iommi, Young, and Trucks have made to the music with the guitar, you have to recognize the unique legacy that is the Gibson SG. I need to thank John Cordy for sharing his playing on various SGs to drive the video along. Check out John's excellent YouTube channel linked in the description. I need to thank my friends at Carter Vintage Guitars for their permission to use clips of some amazing vintage pieces I could only have found at Carter Vintage. This video would not have been possible without Tony Bacon's excellent The SG Guitar Book, and Gil Hembry's Gibson Guitars Ted McCarty's Golden Era, Both are linked in the description. If you have your own SG story, share it in the comments and let me know what I missed. I know I can count on you. I want to thank everyone that stopped by the online store and grabbed some merch or a 5 Watt World Barber Electronics Collaboration overdrive pedal. You keep the channel going. And in particular, I want to thank my friends of 5 Watt on Patreon. It's the guitar community I've always wanted. You're all 5 Watt World. I just make the videos. If you enjoyed this short history of the Gibson SG, hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that too. Thanks for hanging with me until the end. Until next time, I'm Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt World.